This is Conquest, and he is the villain the MCU deserves, but structurally cannot have. Not because he's too violent or too dark, but because the moment a character like that exists in the MCU, a lot of what you've believed about these movies starts to fall apart. And once that happens, there's no fixing it. Most people think Conquest works because he's brutal, but gratuitous violence is actually pretty easy to do, and it doesn't automatically make something good. Plenty of shows go dark for shock value and produce nothing but noise. Conquest works because his brutality is ideologically honest.
If you're implying what I think you're implying...
Stay with me. When Thanos attacks people, the aftermath is presented as a tragedy. The camera lingers on the grief of the survivors. The whole universe mourns. There's music. There's poetry. When Conquest attacks, like he did with Eve and Oliver, which is arguably two of the most disturbing moments in the show, it is not presented as tragedy. Not primarily. It's presented as an act of contempt, because that's what it is to him. He's not taking something precious, he's swatting something inconvenient. And that gap between how much we care and how little he does creates a horror that no amount of CGI destruction can manufacture. You want to know the real reason Conquest could never exist in the MCU?
You want me to just come out and say it? I think you better. Fine!
It's not the gore, it's not even the violence, it's the permanence. In the MCU, the rules are simple, and everyone knows them. Heroes survive. Damage gets repaired by magic, by tech, by time travel, by multiverse variants, whatever. When a city gets leveled, by the next movie, it's fine. When a character dies, the audience is already calculating which loophole brings them back. Nothing stays broken. Conquest stays broken. When Conquest does something terrible to a character, they carry it, physically, psychologically. The show puts the scars on screen and leaves them there. The trauma is woven into every subsequent action, every flinch, every moment where Mark has to make a choice, and you can see that the version of him who hasn't met Conquest would have chosen differently. And here's the most uncomfortable thing about that. That's what real trauma looks like. Invincible isn't being edgy for fun. It's telling you the truth about what it would actually mean for a teenager to be in these situations. The MCU has been protecting you from that truth for 17 years. Conquest is the truth walking in through the front door. Okay, let's play a game. Let's imagine, just for a second, that we actually dropped Conquest into an MCU movie. Conquest versus the Avengers. What happens? You know what? I'm going to stop right now. Because judging by how both of his fights with Mark went, if this were a real MCU movie, we'd already be pushing that PG-13 rating to its absolute breaking point. The point is, Conquest is just completely willing to do things that Marvel heroes, operating under PG-13 physics, simply cannot respond to in kind. And that's a genuine creative problem, not just a tonal one. A structural one. Because the MCU's storytelling DNA is built around the idea that intelligence and courage beat raw power. That the underdog with heart finds the clever solution. That there's always a button to press.
Don't push this button.
A stone to steal. A time to heist. Conquest doesn't have a button. He is the button. And he's pressing it against your face.
Which button is the button you're supposed to push? Point to it. No!
Here's the thing I don't want to gloss over, because it matters more than I think people realize. The MCU isn't struggling right now just because of bad writing or bad CGI or too many Disney Plus shows, although all of those things are true. It's struggling because the audience has evolved and the studio hasn't noticed. Think about the people who were 8 years old when Iron Man came out in 2008. Those people are now in their mid to late 20s. They grew up. Their taste in stories grew up. They went through things. They started to understand grief, failure, moral compromise, the actual weight of consequences. And they kept coming back to Marvel, expecting the franchise to meet them where they were. It didn't. Marvel stayed 8 years old. Meanwhile, the boys showed up and made superhero stories explicitly about corporate corruption, trauma, and power. Invincible showed up and made them about the actual physical and psychological cost of violence. And audiences, particularly the ones who'd grown up on the MCU, absolutely devoured both. Because finally, here were superhero stories that were treating them like adults. The data backs this up completely. The Boys and Invincible consistently generate the kind of fan discourse that Marvel used to own.
Have you seen the memes? Have you seen the memes about me?
Real, invested, emotional discourse about what the story means, about what the characters are going through. That's the conversation people want to be having about superhero fiction right now. And Conquest is the catalyst for a huge chunk of that conversation. Because Conquest forces the story, and by extension, the audience, to ask a question that the MCU has spent nearly 2 decades carefully avoiding. What does heroism actually cost? Not philosophically, not in a Tony makes a sacrifice and gives a tearful goodbye way that gets cut to a swelling Alan Silvestri score. Actually, physically, mentally, irreversibly. What does it cost?
I really can't say.
Remember earlier when I mentioned how the MCU treats destruction? That's the comfortable lie. That feeling of watching a city get destroyed and then watching everyone crack a joke about it.
That's the best you can do!
The comfortable lie isn't just bad storytelling. It's actually damaging storytelling. When you tell story after story where consequences don't stick, where deaths are reversed, where trauma is a temporary aesthetic, you're training your audience to not care. You're teaching them that nothing matters because nothing stays broken. And then you wonder why people feel disconnected from the stakes, why the latest "this is the most dangerous threat the Avengers have ever faced" announcement gets met with a collective shrug. You created the apathy. It's the logical outcome of your own formula. Contrast that with the Conquest fight in Invincible. The reason that fight hits so hard, the reason people talked about it months after watching, the reason it comes up whenever someone asks, "What's the most brutal scene in any superhero media?" isn't because of the fight sequence. It's because we were invested. Because the show spent enough time making Mark Grayson feel real, feel human, feel fragile in the way that actual people are fragile. That when Conquest starts systematically destroying him, it felt like losing something real. That's what great villain work does. It doesn't just threaten the hero's body, it threatens our connection to the hero. It weaponizes how much we care. The MCU used to do this. Civil War genuinely tried. The Winter Soldier genuinely did it. These were movies where the hero wasn't certain to win, where the stakes felt personal, where the villain represented something ideologically coherent and terrifying. And then Phase 4 happened, and suddenly every villain is either a misguided idealist with a point or a multiversal variant of something you already know. And the whole thing started feeling like a very expensive theme park ride you've been on enough times that you know exactly where the drops are. Conquest is the villain who doesn't let you know where the drops are, because in his world, there are no safety bars. Let me ask you something directly. When was the last time a Marvel movie made you genuinely afraid for a character? Think about it. I'll wait. If you're honest with yourself, it's been a while, hasn't it? And the fact that you had to think about it is the whole argument. Now think about any significant fight scene in Invincible. Did you feel afraid? I'm willing to bet you did, because that show earns the fear. It builds characters you love and then puts them in genuine danger. Not movie danger, not "they'll probably be fine" danger, but actual uncertainty about survival. And when Conquest arrives, that uncertainty turns into something close to dread. Robert Kirkman, who created Invincible in the comics, has said in interviews that the whole point was to explore what superhero stories look like if you take the physics and emotions seriously. What does it actually do to a person to be in these fights? What does it actually look like when two beings with superhuman strength fight at full capacity? What does recovery actually look like? What scars do you carry? The MCU, operating under Disney's mandate to be all ages, all markets, all merchandise, fundamentally cannot answer those questions honestly. The business model won't allow it.
We don't do that here.
But here's the thing I want to be careful about, because I don't want this to be a pure MCU pile-on. The MCU has done genuinely brilliant things. The ambition of connecting 20-plus movies into a coherent universe? Genuinely unprecedented. The casting across those films? Exceptional. Individual moments of brilliance, the airport fight in Civil War, the No Way Home reunion, Deadpool and Wolverine. These are real achievements. The problem isn't that Marvel can't make good content. The problem is that the formula has become a cage, and Conquest is what's waiting outside the cage. Here's where I land on all of this. The next Avengers films have a chance to course correct in a real way. The MCU isn't dying. Let's not be dramatic.
That part is a little dramatic.
There are still too many talented people, too much infrastructure, and too much cultural goodwill built up over 20-plus genuinely great movies for it to just collapse. Daredevil Born Again Season 2 proved the audience will still show up in droves when you let the creatives off the leash and actually commit to darker, more character-driven stakes. Even some of the 2025 films had passionate fans who loved what they were trying to do. But those bright spots are the exceptions that prove the rule. They happen when Marvel temporarily steps outside the formula. The sanitization, the reversible stakes, the quip as shield, the villains who can't actually hurt you. That formula still needs to die, or at least evolve into something less comfortable. And weirdly, I think Conquest is the best possible teacher. Not because Marvel should go make an R-rated movie. That's not the lesson. The lesson is simpler. Care about your characters. Care about them so much that when something bad happens to them, it matters. Make the bad things stick. Let the scars stay. Let the trauma be real. Let your villains be genuinely terrifying instead of philosophically interesting in the abstract. Let your heroes be changed, permanently, meaningfully, by what they go through. Conquest works because Invincible cares. It cares about Mark Grayson with an almost uncomfortable intensity. It wants you to feel every hit he takes, and that caring is what transforms brutal violence from shock value into storytelling. The MCU used to care that much, about Tony Stark especially in the early days, about Steve Rogers. There were moments where you could feel the franchise's genuine investment in these people as characters rather than IP vessels. Conquest is the reminder of what it looks like when that investment is sustained, when it's not traded away for a franchise setup or a quip to get a laugh from the back row, when it's protected all the way to the end. So here's where I'll leave you. The next time you're watching a superhero movie, MCU, DC, whatever's next, and you feel that slight hollowness in your chest during the dangerous sequence, that vague sense of, I know they'll be fine, settling over you like a fog, that feeling is the absence of Conquest. And the next time you're rewatching Invincible, and your whole body tenses, and you're actually scared for a cartoon character, that feeling? That's storytelling working exactly the way it's supposed to, just honest and real. The superhero genre isn't tired, the formula is tired. There's a difference, and the proof is Invincible. Go watch Invincible if you haven't. If you have, rewatch the Conquest arc. And then come back here and tell me the last time a Marvel movie made you feel anything close to that. I'll be in the comments. Subscribe if you want more of this. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.